Welcome back to CyHawk Talk here on a Monday. We're doing a Sunday rewind show on a Monday. And if you couldn't tell, I don't know ball. That's why I have the bag of shame on my head for today's show. At least the intro. It's a little hard to breathe. My nose is covered up and it's a little crushed. The Amazon package is the best I could do for a brown paper bag today. But if you're a fan of the show, you'll know that basically everything I said on Thursday was wrong. And Ben might just be I don't know what's a famous philosopher. It might just be the Aristotle of our age here. Football Aristotle. That's what we'll call Ben.
The
But we're
ball
doing
is
a
done.
football Aristotle. What we're doing a Sunday rewind, taking our talking our takeaways. But Ben, you got to be riding a little high, thinking about that dinner you're going to get on Saturday.
Yeah, I'll have to find a nice steakhouse in Ames. I like it medium rare. We'll go large baked potato on the side. Something to get my money's worth out of you.
Well, go ahead and take us into your number one takeaway from Iowa State's beatdown of the poor Coyotes from South Dakota.
I just think the way Iowa State made you think that they weren't in Ireland a week ago playing this game. We saw, Kansas State struggle. Kansas State looked terrible in its comeback to the mainland against North Dakota. And with the way Iowa State went out there and just dominated, what we think is a pretty good South Dakota team tells me that all the work and the effort that Matt Campbell and this coaching staff put into thinking about the trip and thinking about coming back really paid off. It shows me that this Cyclone team is there's a maturity about them. I think it all starts with Rocco Beck, the quarterback, who was nearly perfect on Saturday. So it just showed me a lot that this was a trap game that not just you was buying into. There was a lot of people who thought this could be a trap for the Cyclones, and Matt Campbell and this staff got him through like there was no difficulty.
Yeah, I guess I was catching some vibes last week, and it just ended up being the wrong Irish Aer Lingus Classic participant, potentially upset by the wrong Dakota school. I was misreading the vibes. If I was a medium, some dead male relative was talking to me last week when I was talking to the person, but it was actually a dead female relative, and it was actually maybe a future female relative talking to this person. So I was just a little confused on the vibes I was getting.
Man, you're really going, you're really trying all the avenues to get your picks back on track. If that's the case, um, you got me up there with the Cy Rizzler, just these two great, you know, thinking minds in modern times that allow me to make these picks. But
This is actually football Aristotle right here. You can tell by his sweet style, the six shades, hands in his pockets. You can't see that.
you like that? I wore
Dripped
my
out.
green for the Irish coast in that picture. 18 takeaways from an Iowan's trip to Ireland up on the quadcitytimes.com. Free to read.
Yeah, free to read for this weekend. All of our coverage over the last couple months is free to read right now. So go be sure to check that out and find out that a subscription is definitely worth it for the Cyhawk coverage you're getting. What's your number two takeaway from Saturday's game?
I always look for something to build on, for something that Iowa State didn't do quite right. And it's tough in a 55-7 game. Rocco Becht got up there and said, "Hey, there's plenty left to work on. There's plenty to improve on." It's like, Rocco, you were 19 of 20. Yeah, there's one pass you could have improved on. But something that I seriously think is going to be a flaw that might come up when Iowa State's not playing an FCS team is they still have a lack of pass rush. No sacks against the Coyotes, which is something that you would have liked to see them improve on, especially as South Dakota scored a touchdown on a first half drive and really moved the ball well until an interception by Jamison Patton in the red zone kind of flipped that game on its head. So I'm still looking for this Cyclone pass rush. They're not going to be a team that gets after the quarterback crazy. They play a three-man front. We know that about Iowa State, but the defensive coordinator John Haycock, Ethan, told us, hey, there's going to be situational football where we want to get after the quarterback, where we want to be able to run the passer. And there were two instances when Aiden Bauman, a former Iowa State Cyclone, now playing for South Dakota, got blitzed, and I mean that the Cyclones brought five rushers, more than their normal three. And Bauman was able to stand in the pocket and, get two passes off that went for long third down conversions. So still looking for this Iowa State pass rush, only one sack in its first two games.
And then your number three takeaway from the game.
I was curious what the running back situation was going to be like. And, with Abu Sama and Carson Hansen. And I think another takeaway is we could maybe throw
Aiden Flora into that. The guy who I wasn't really thinking about in this Iowa State backfield. We saw them run three guys all of last year. Could Aiden Flora, a freshman local product, be kind of a third element to this Cyclone backfield? He didn't get a lot of work, operating as a running back against South Dakota, but he popped on film as a kick returner, as a punt returner. He had two returns for, one was 66 yards that he actually returned 99 yards for a touchdown, but ultimately stepped out of bounds. And the other was like a 45-yard return. So Aiden Flora really popped on film. I'm wondering if he has Iowa State's punt return game in a spot where, you don't miss Jalen Knoll, who was so good in that role last year. And B, could Flora possibly contribute to this running back attack as we get into a full Big 12 season? And, there's going to be times where guys get banged up and you want to mix a third back perhaps in there. So Aiden Flora, could he be a possible element to this Cyclone running game?
Certainly tough to take away a whole lot from such a beatdown of a lesser opponent. So how do you temper what your takeaways were in this one?
Yeah, it's crazy, Ethan. What does Nick Saban always say? There's a lot of rat poison around. I definitely see a lot of Cyclone fans on social media, more confident than ever right now
Going into CyHawk, which I'm going to write a story this week. Maybe not such a great thing for Iowa State, considering the last time Iowa State fans came into a CyHawk super confident was 2021 with Brock Purdy and company, and the Hawkeyes came to Jack Trice Stadium and won that game. So I don't know. It's interesting to kind of temper these expectations. The Kansas State team, which we thought Iowa State, had a really nice win in week 0 there. Maybe the Wildcats aren't as good as we thought they were coming into the season. So who knows how good these first two Iowa State wins are? Tough to say, with only 2 data points of football games to plot out. But right now, as a Cyclone fan, you love what you've seen for the first 2 weeks of the season.
I asked that question to lead into my first takeaway, which we'll get into right after this.
Like, playing in front of Mark, can you tell us kind of what he was like back there in the real game?
Yeah, I mean, he's just the ultimate leader, right? He gets us going when things aren't going well. And then just to see him run the ball and just how physical he is. You don't see that a lot with a quarterback. So taking hits, diving, doing all these things that a quarterback, won't typically do. He's just an ultra competitor, and to see him go out there today was awesome. It was tough. I think he started cramping, and he was like, "No, I'm sorry, man." Like, he can't control that. He wanted to be out there with us, but, I'm really excited for him.
Back here on CyHawk Talk Sunday Rewind on a Monday. Happy Labor Day. As I mentioned before the break, kind of need to temper expectations or temper takeaways coming out of an FCS matchup, which both Iowa State and Iowa played this week. And I think that's going to be my number one takeaway. It was my last takeaway in my takeaways article from Saturday, but it'll be my number one here today. And it's not really time to overreact. I'm certainly going to, you don't want to forget, and you don't want to just excuse a poor passing performance from Mark Gronowski and the Iowa offense this last weekend. But it's also things just kind of got away from the Hawkeyes, even though they ended up winning by 27. Gronowski, after the game said he was disappointed, said he was maybe a little too excited for the game. And then you kind of saw him settle in, and then this cramps issue pops up. And at that point, Tim Lester went super conservative with his play calling. I mean, the rushing game had over 300 yards, and they ran the ball about four times as often as they threw the ball on Saturday. So I don't know if this was a very good gauge. I tweeted it out, I think, during the second quarter as well. I've seen Mark Gronowski 2 times prior to this when he was at South Dakota State playing against UNI, one really good UNI team, one not so great UNI team, and he looked really good in both of those games. So I don't think we saw the best of him on Saturday. I think that there is plenty more in store for growth for this passing offense. So that's my number one takeaway. It's not time to overreact. I ended that one by saying, save your hot takes for the ride home from Ames and Jack Trice, because I think you'll know a lot more about this team after the CyHawk matchup.
I'll back you up. In the one game last season, I saw Mark
Gronowski play when I was in Stillwater. He looked better than what we saw on Saturday for sure. So interesting to maybe think those cramps or nerves playing in Kinnick Stadium for the first time got to him. It'll be sure that Gronowski will probably look better as the season goes on. What was your second takeaway?
My number two takeaway today will be my number one from Saturday, which is that that was a dud of a debut for Mark Gronowski. Less than 50 passing yards, barely 50% completion percentage. At one point, he was like 2 for 7. It was bad. There's no way to sugarcoat it. I had somebody email me upset that I was so negative with my headline. I thought I was pretty fair. I mean, it was an FCS opponent. You had less than 50 passing, or your starting quarterback had less than 50 passing yards. Looked really uncomfortable, and I think it really started on that first drive when he missed Sam Phillips in wide open in the end zone on a play action boot to the right, and after that he had 2 completions at that point, 1 incompletion. After that he had 4 straight incompletions. They had back-to-back 3-and-outs. They lost 4 yards on those 2 drives combined. So it was just like you could almost see him become more nervous because he missed that throw. And I asked him during the summer, I was like, this offense kind of has a reputation for not being a good passing offense. And he affirmed that he was aware of that. And so I think that when something like that happens, the doubts can creep in. It's like, oh man, maybe, am I not not the savior, not to say that he's got a great ego, and, he handled everything perfectly in the post game press conference and was, very, very harsh with his own criticism and very honest about how he felt about his game. But you could kind of see the game unravel at that point. And then, quarter later, he starts to settle in. I think he completed 6 of his final 7 passes. They were a lot of dump offs. UAlbany clearly didn't want to get shredded over the top. Again, it was bad. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. That the Sam Phillips play is when it started to go off the rails, but don't overreact.
Well, yeah, I think if you're
To have asked Gronowski to write the headline for his performance, if he was authoring the story, I don't think he would have been super kind to himself. He himself called it a disappointing day.
I will say too, he also said he likes to get during media day. He said he likes to get hit, and that's when he really feels like he's in the game. Like he doesn't feel he's in the game until he gets popped for that first time. And they didn't really dial up. They dialed up one designed run, but he didn't really take a hit on that design run on the opening drive. And you could kind of see as Lester got him more involved with some design runs deeper into the game that was when he started to get more comfortable in the passing game as well. So I don't know if you need to dial up a couple of early runs on Saturday for him to get really comfortable in a hostile Jack Trice, but I think that there's a path that we saw to seeing a comfortable and confident Mark Gronowski under center.
What's your next takeaway from the game?
Well, if you kind of go back to what I was talking about, what I wanted to see on Saturday, I said I wanted to see the defense at least look the part. You're not going to know anything really from a dominating performance against UAlbany, but what I think we saw is the defense looked the part. They limited the Great Danes to less than 50 yards rushing the ball, only 13 to running backs. So they got gashed by a running quarterback, and Kirk Ferentz kind of joked about it in the postgame press conference. He said, I thought we knew that their guy could run, but I guess we had forgotten that their guy could run. And their quarterback, Jack Shields, was just about the only thing effective they could do on the ground, and most of them were not designed runs. They were, no one's open downfield, so I'm going to scramble. And if you don't have a spy, that's going to be, that's as we saw on Thursday, as Brendan Sorsby just gashed Nebraska on that final drive. If you don't have a QB spy, a quarterback's going to be able to gain some ground when, the pass rush isn't getting home, which is also one of my takeaways. I would have liked to see more pass rush, only 2 sacks, 1 quarterback hurry on Saturday. Would have liked to see some bigger numbers against an FCS opponent, but maybe they were keeping things vanilla so that the Cyclones couldn't get any ideas.
What was UAlbany's mascot situation? Were they with live Great Dane on the sideline?
I didn't see a live Great Dane, nor did I see anyone in costume. I don't know if you would have traveled a live mascot or if you would have traveled person in a mascot costume. This certainly didn't bring a band with them. I didn't see any cheerleaders either. So maybe I would have to attend a UAlbany home game to get a proper feel for what the mascot game is.
Very disappointing. I'd like to see Bevo from Texas go up against a Great Dane. I think that'd be a better fight than against Uga.
I was gonna say hopefully not a repeat of the Uga situation from a couple of years ago. We'll be back on Wednesday or Thursday for another edition of CyHawk Talk. We'll preview the CyHawk matchup and potentially have Ben describe what he's going to be eating for dinner on my dime while I'm in Ames. That'll be CyHawk Talk for a Sunday Rewind on a Monday. Thanks for watching.